Let's go to the next part here on the economy. This is with Heather Long reporting about the strong jobs report. Let's put this up there on the screen. Very interesting data. The U.S. economy has added 254,000 jobs in September, above expectations, a major bounce from August. Unemployment rate is now down to 4.1%. This is interesting just because this is right before the election, and it does show there are signals that people are feeling a little bit differently about the economy as opposed to, let's say, 2021. That's especially indicated in this Cook political report. Let's put that next one up, please, on the screen. It shows that Trump actually led Harris on inflation and cost of living from 48 to 42. Today, voters are more evenly divided on who they trust to handle the issue. The tariff plan, they said 45% of companies said that import goods would, quote, increase the price consumers pay for the tariff. Voters' view on the economy are, quote, improving a bit. 46% now say the economy is getting better or staying the same, which is up 38% from May. And then, quote, young people are the most pessimistic about the economy. Amongst the youngest cohort of voters, 63% think inflation is getting worse. So some insights, I think, where you could get from this are not only on the economy, but about the edge of the economy. So it's not a good thing if the Trump margin is not bigger with the economy, because that always was a major advantage for him. At the same time, with the jobs report and all, it's always difficult to parse, especially with wage data and all of this, because the unemployment rate has been low for quite some time. They've been beating jobs expectations and all of that. But clearly people's experience of the economy and even of inflation and their memories of the last couple of years have really weighed them down, I think correctly. And I don't think this also factors in, for example, housing and a lot of the other structural problems. So I'm of like two minds of the way to look at it. And this is part of the other problem with, there's this huge war amongst economists right now about whether the economy is good or bad. And my general instinct is just to trust people whenever people are like, it's okay. Basically, rich people, people with assets and others are like, yeah, I'm feeling better now. The younger voters who are most locked out are like, I'm not happy about this at all. And poorer and or middle class people are like, yeah, it's getting better-ish, but I haven't been very happy over the last couple of years.
I would love to see the divide on economic pessimism between homeowners and non-homeowners.
Yeah, there you go. That's the
because I do think housing is, I mean, it is a big part of why people feel so dissatisfied with the economy and the direction of the economy. And so it makes sense that young voters would be the most pessimistic about where the economy stands and, you know, would have the most negative feelings because they're more likely to not be homeowners and they are more likely to be, you know, getting gouged by landlords who are using these algorithms to like price fix and, you know, getting screwed on rent prices. And then they're looking and thinking like, I'm never going to be able to own a home. And these prices just keep escalating and escalating and escalating out of control. That cost of housing is so central to my whole budget. Like, no, of course I don't feel like the economy is great. So I do feel like that is one of the continues to be one of the central divides in our economy, in our society, and also one of the central pain points for everyone up and down the spectrum. But if you're not a homeowner in particular, that is a massive pain point. You know, going back to the politics, I do think these numbers are significant that Kamala has erased. Trump had a huge lead on inflation when it came to Joe Biden. People, even though Kamala's policies aren't really all that different from Joe Biden, people feel like she's different, feel like she would be better on the economy than he would be. You know, at least she's sentient. I guess that's part of it as well. So the fact she's erased his lead there is important. The fact she's even cut his lead on the economy overall down to 5 points is also, I think, quite significant because that has always been one of the strongest issues. And I would say, you know, whatever you think about, Saagar and I have a disagreement about Trump's tariff plan. He's in support of the across-the-board tariff. I'm very much opposed. I think it's sort of, you know, economic insanity. It would certainly escalate the price of consumer goods, you know, kind of across the board. How much is a matter of some debate. But I think that's a very strong message for her. I think they should be running a lot of ads. Apparently, focus groups coming out of her debate with Donald Trump said in terms of her economic pitch, the thing that hit the best was her describing his tariffs as the Trump tax and talking about how it would increase the price of goods. It reminds me of, Saagar, I don't know, you've probably seen these commercials that for Republicans who support the quote unquote flat tax, which would just get rid of the income tax, but then you get taxed more on everything you buy at the grocery store. I've seen these very effective ads at the congressional level where it's somebody like going through the grocery store shopping and showing how much the price of goods will increase on every single purchase. some of the most devastating and effective ads that I think I've honestly ever seen. So if she wants to continue sort of building on now she's even with him, I think they should be hitting that over and over and over again because, the biggest issue that people have in the economy right now is high prices. So if you're explaining to people like he's going to make things worse with this policy, I think it's very politically effective.
But it doesn't make any sense. Her administration and Biden have expanded more tariffs than Donald Trump did while in office. So clearly they philosophically support tariffs. The reason that the prices are high right now is because of the global supply chain. The reason why we need tariffs is specifically to build up domestic manufacturing. So I just don't think it falls apart, in my opinion, along the actual analysis.
Having selective tariffs on industries that, you want to build up, like that makes sense. Having tariffs on like bananas and coffee makes no sense.
Why?
And in
Why?
fact, even if you want to, certain industries like we're just not well suited, like our climate is not particularly well suited to. And also a big part of our manufacturing sector is advanced manufacturing where you require parts from overseas in order to, build and assemble that final product. So now you're talking about all of those costs coming in, all of those pieces coming in from overseas are going to have an added cost to it. That actually doesn't even necessarily accomplish what you want to accomplish, which is to build out domestic manufacturing. So again, whether you support the policy or not, it's pretty clear it is going to increase prices across the board. So having a few areas where, okay, we can handle prices increasing on washing machines or whatever for some time period. But for voters looking at this and thinking, okay, we're going to increase prices on literally everything across the board. It's unpopular. Right. It's already unpopular. And like I said, I think it's effective political messaging to lean into that given where the pain point is right now.
It's up to America. You people want cheap shit from China and from everywhere else, and you want to complain about inflation every time something happens in a global thing, then yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and support zero tariffs.
Inflation concerns are a reasonable concern.
No, okay, but I'm saying if you have to decide what you want. You want to be extremely vulnerable to price shocks for every single little thing that you consume in the economy, or do you actually want to try and buy as much stuff that's made here in America as possible? And that's a vision that I support. Also, with tariffs, it would bring in hundreds of billions of dollars in additional revenue. That is unambiguous. America is the beacon of global trade. People will export here no matter what. The idea that we're not going to have some beneficial, not only monetary but manufacturing rise from tariffs is like ridiculous. And that's what I mean too. Is if she was running a purely neoliberal trade campaign, fine. But her only objection is like, oh, there's tariffs on there's too many tariffs on other sectors. But the whole idea of targeted tariffs reveals that the idea of tariff itself is the big ideological war we had to fight was whether tariffs are useful in any context. They have already conceded that. Now it's just a battle between where the tariffs should be and not. And clearly, what we saw from the Midwestern states all throughout the Trump administration, people kept saying, oh, all these people are going to revolt, all these farmers, et cetera. It's not true. It actually benefited their economy. It's not like our trade with China was affected really at all. If anything, our trade deficit went up under
our trade deficit did go up under the Trump administration, which is part of my point. So here's the thing. There's a big difference between, you don't have to have an all or nothing approach. So again, there are certain industries that are important for, for the economic base, that are growing industries of the future like EVs, that are important for our national security. Steel, I think, would be an important, fall into that category, that are important in terms of during COVID, we learned like, oh shit, we don't make any masks or gowns here. Like there are some critical supply lines that, yes, it makes sense to protect those industries, even if it comes at some cost to consumers. To do that across the board just doesn't make any sense. Then you're just hiking prices on everything, including things that we don't really have any interest in making here. And that, or we don't have the climate even to grow here. So, I think I think it makes a lot of sense to actually have targeted tariffs. And the other piece is, so under Trump, you just had these certain tariffs. And it actually didn't accomplish what they wanted to accomplish, which was to bring manufacturing jobs back. As you mentioned, Saagar, the trade deficit actually increased with China. And we lost manufacturing jobs, even excluding the COVID era, economic decline. We've seen more manufacturing job creation under the Biden administration because they've had a combination both of targeted tariffs plus industrial policy investment through things like the Infrastructure Act and the CHIPS Act. The EV sector is, one important indicator of that in particular. They focused on, increasing EV battery production here in the U.S., and that has actually borne some fruit. But to just do tariffs across the board, it's using a sledgehammer for a policy that makes more sense to use a scalpel or perhaps a large knife, but not a sledgehammer.
Look, I'm a proponent of industrial policy, and that would be my criticism of the Trump administration. But on the tariff question, again, like a lot of it is frankly just dishonest if you are also a person who supports tariff. Like, here's the truth. You will pay more for electronics under the Biden administration than you did under, let's say, the Bush administration, especially whenever we factor in the export duties or the export-import duties with respect to tariffs. I think that's fine. I think that's a good thing. I think it was a good thing under the Trump administration. Yes, it's true. Tariffs alone are not going to accomplish anything, but it's also about the economic vision of the United States. What Trump talks a lot about is Smoot-Hawley, which is derided by a lot of these brain-dead economists, and they have this whole theory about how Smoot-Hawley is really why the Great Depression went the way that it was, and I don't agree with that at all, and there's a growing amount of literature that goes into that, specifically around the manufacturing piece, like what you talked about with the advanced manufacturing. That's not necessarily the only economy that we want to live in, which is just purely high-tech manufacturing. You actually want labor capital jobs that don't require like a minimum of a college education for mechanical engineering to be able to work with, and then importing a lot of the other cheaper stuff from China, Vietnam, whatever, India, etc., or Mexico. You actually want the majority of that supply chain, here in the U.S., and that will require a significant amount of tariffs. I'm not dishonest. I think it would lead to higher prices. I also think it would unleash more, GDP here in the U.S. And I think it's unfortunate that this whole tariff thing, it's like when the way that they talk about it, where they don't ever acknowledge that they believe in a very similar vision, just a similar vision targeted towards industries which they think are more important. But at the end of the day, you're agreeing with the philosophy.
No,
the philosophy is important.
I mean, you're acting like there's only one answer: tariffs yes or tariffs no, where it's very reasonable and I think correct to say it depends. Right? Is it an industry that is, has an important job base here in the U.S.? Is it an industry that is growing for the future, like, green tech? I mean, the amount of solar panels that we manufacture here has skyrocketed under the Biden administration because of the combination of tariffs and industrial policy. So I don't think that the answer is just tariffs yes or tariffs no. You could say, all right, it makes sense, and it's a reasonable trade-off for consumers to have to pay more for washing machines or have to pay more for EV vehicles even in the short term, because this is an industry that's important to the future and that is important to our economy in the future. Like, the trade-off is worth it, versus just this, blanket across the board. No, we just want to raise prices on everything, including bananas, which it doesn't even make sense for us to grow here in the U.S. So that's my only point. I'll just go back to the political point, which is that even though you support it and other people do as well, I think it is a very potent political messaging at a time when the top economic pain point is prices, to point out that Trump's policies unambiguously would raise prices on a lot of goods across the board. The last thing I'll say is, it is a very different economic landscape than 2016. In 2016, we had low inflation. In 2016, price increases were not, didn't rate for consumers because we weren't experiencing them. So it's a very different economic landscape that this blanket across the board tariff policy enters into.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong, and I agree. Americans are very short term in the way that they're thinking, but
they want to be able to afford groceries and be able to eat and live.
For a reason, which is mass deindustrialization. Yes, per capita, things were more expensive. People also had a lot more money back in the 1970s before all of this trade bullshit that currently happens. So the more in direction of tariffs, I think we're better off that we are. I mean, even the solar thing is a good example. The only reason that they're fake, these manufacturing numbers on solar are totally fake, especially because they had to waive the tariff on the import duty from China because no solar company was able to actually properly manufacture it in the U.S. We had whole debates about this a couple of years ago. People can go and watch. In fact, I think Ro Khanna and I argue about it here at the desk. They had to waive the tariff on it because it's not actually capable here in the U.S. That's a perfect example. Yes, you need industrial policy, but for a lot of this stuff, the tariff itself is important in actually literally forcing the manufacturer here in the US to, especially against nations like China, which not only do they have massive tariffs on us, but have their own state-sponsored industrial policy. Every high-tech manufacturing piece that people always point to, France, Germany, etc., these are massively subsidized by their own government. Only in America are we the fools that float entirely on free market and just let all these other companies or these countries completely take advantage of us, from steel, transshipping. I mean, it's a disaster. I just think the current economic landscape.
Even for what you're talking about, just increasing manufacturing. Again, it doesn't make any sense to put tariffs on things like bananas and coffee. We'll put that aside. But okay, let's imagine that you are manufacturing something that requires a lot of imports from overseas. And now suddenly your costs have gone up on every single one of those pieces. What are you likely to do? It is just as likely that you decide to relocate your factory to an international location and then bear the cost of, okay, just one time I'm gonna have to pay, it's the tariff coming in to sell into the US market. It's just as likely that you end up with a lot of those jobs leaving to go to places where they can import the goods without having to pay that tariff on every single piece that goes into manufacturing the final product. So it's not even clear that for what you're talking about, that you end up with high prices, and you could also end up with losing manufacturing jobs in some of these industries. So that's why I just say, it makes perfect sense to me. And in certain industries, to be protectionist, to say this is something we want to foster. We're going to put a tariff. We're going to do industrial policy. We're going to have these incentives for companies to locate here. We have seen that be successful under the Biden administration in certain key areas in a way that it wasn't under the Trump administration, because all they did was tariffs. But in some industries, again, it just makes no sense, especially if it's not coupled with that industrial policy. Then the only thing that you're doing is raising prices and also potentially losing manufacturing jobs in some of these
my
cases.
response would be, A, we have the long arm of the U.S. government. If you want to try and leave, then good luck, because we should penalize the shit out of you. And that's actually something Trump supports, so I think that's good. Whether it would ever get through a Trump Congress or any of that, but I mean, that's on a philosophical basis. It's like, okay, you want to leave John Deere, GM, and all of this, then welcome. You're going to have to pay a lot of money back to enter our markets if you want to leave our country. And anybody who thinks this is radical, every nation on earth does this. If you're a Swiss manufacturing company, pharma, good luck leaving Switzerland. If you are Volvo or any of these other companies in Europe, yeah, good luck actually leaving your flagship. They will smack you. It will never happen. Only here are we saying, like, it's even an acceptable solution that people who get billions of dollars in government subsidies are allowed to just freely leave or whatever when they want, especially when they're still in the red, considering their contribution to us and all the taxpayer assistance, subsidies, et cetera, that they get on a basis. So that's why the tariff is, in general, on the policy. I don't agree. I don't disagree. I think it probably politically, is not landing the way that I wish it would. And I think people should actually have to think about this stuff, not in terms of like the immediate term of whether something is going to cost 10 cents more or less. You need to think much more in the future, because if you don't, then you'll end up in a COVID situation where you can't buy anything at the grocery store, or you're going to have a 3-year supply shock to the U.S. economy, and everyone's going to freak out and wonder how exactly that happened. That's 40 years of problems that happened.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and move on to Kamala Harris courting Wall Street, because there are some big questions about whether she would continue the parts of the Biden administration that, I really support. And those pieces have been specifically around corporate power and antitrust, and also the more aggressive approach that the SEC has taken towards crypto. By the way, one of the, I think, undercovered stories in this election by ourselves and everybody in media is that crypto is the largest funder by industry of both campaigns. I mean, if you look across our entire political spectrum, the amount of dollars coming from crypto dwarfs literally any other industry. So they seem to effectively have gotten their way. Trump flipped on his views on crypto. Kamala seems to be behind the scenes, doing some similar, like, I'll be different than Joe Biden. We can put this up on the screen from the Financial Times. They had a good write-up of the behind-the-scenes charm offensive that they describe as beginning to, quote-unquote, pay off. She's been building ties with finance bosses in an attempt to quell support for Donald Trump. They quote one leading private equity investor that I thought this was pretty interesting. He said, I was going to vote for Trump because I was annoyed about being targeted by Biden. I could reconsider now. Trump is still better on taxes, meaning that he will cut taxes for the rich, but Harris seems to be more like Clinton than Obama or Biden. Hard to think of more damning words. Also, the delusional view of Obama is crazy, but it's fair that Biden, the Biden administration has been more aggressive, certainly on antitrust, than the Obama, Clinton, Bush, or Trump administrations. So she has still, Saagar, not taken a public position on whether she would maintain Lina Khan in, at the FTC. But behind the scenes, she seems to be indicating to these Wall Street people that, I'm going to be different than Biden on this.
Well, the biggest tell to me was Ben Horowitz. For people who don't know who that is, he's the co-head of A16Z, who previously had actually come out and endorsed Donald Trump, and is now actually, quote, making significant donations to Kamala Harris. As of just yesterday, it was announced that because of his, quote, long-standing relationship and him and his wife who have known Kamala Harris, that they have decided they will be making significant donation to entities who support the Harris-Walz campaign. But that perhaps was the biggest tell to me, because he previously had literally endorsed Donald Trump and said that he was better for technology, the technology industry, and the Biden administration was bad, specifically Lina Khan and all of that. So the flip from Horowitz on that was the most significant to me about where things are going. I don't think people like that give billions or millions of dollars and who are themselves billionaires with money that is on the line unless they have somewhat of assurance of the way things are going to go. That just broke yesterday.
Yeah, I saw that as well. I mean, to me, it's deeply troubling. Kamala, clearly, she has very few ideological commitments to anything. And it doesn't even, she doesn't even really need their money. We showed you the charts before. She's wildly out fundraising him. She's wildly out spending him. So it would be far better, Kamala Harris, I know you don't care about the morals of the principles. It would be far better politically for you to be seen as having an adversarial relationship with the people that most of the country absolutely hates. And listen, there's a lot you can say about Donald Trump this time and the coziness with billionaires. He just literally had, one of the world's wealthiest men up on stage with him at a rally. He's been going around to oil and gas executives saying, give me $1 billion and I'll give you whatever you want. He's been shamelessly, in a way that is more brazen than, frankly, anything we've seen before, going to wealthy billionaires and saying, fund my campaign and I will cut your taxes and give you everything that you want. But you can't make that case when you are yourself engaged in some version of the same game. So, the other thing that I see is Mark Cuban going around and making this case publicly, basically, making a similar case. Oh, she's going to be different than Biden. She's going to be better to Wall Street, et cetera, et cetera. And it's I don't know why you think this helps your campaign. It also speaks to the embrace of the Cheneys. I mean, embracing Dick Cheney is just, this man is pure evil. It's just disgusting to affiliate yourself with him whatsoever. And I don't know what you think you're getting out of that when so much of the public is in favor of taxing these people more, is in favor of a more aggressive stance vis-a-vis the rich, is disgusted with how much they've eaten of the economy and how much they control the entire world. So even just from a base political perspective, I don't get it. And certainly from a moral and policy perspective, I think it is the dead wrong direction for her to take.
I don't think it's, yes. However, with the money, with who she is, with the people who are surrounding her, it's not a surprise exactly why she's going in that direction. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.